Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am Courtney Anderson, and I am so grateful that you are taking part in the program. Today we have a show that is one of the episodes in our Management Magicians series. And our Management Magician series, of course, is dedicated and devoted and in honor of those who volunteer and choose to serve as managers in organizations of all sizes and in all parts of the world. Some organizations are for-profit, some organizations are non-profit, some organizations are in sophisticated and very well-sourced parts of the world in terms of materials and infrastructure, and some managers are serving in places under incredible challenges and just getting the resources and infrastructure to get their goals accomplished. But no matter who or what type of organization, are managers who are able to achieve and surpass their goals while having a positive emotional and psychological response themselves. They feel good about their lives, right? They're not that miserable manager. They might say, I got it all done, but I'm pulling my hair out and I feel sick at my stomach. I can't stand my job. No. That's not a management magician. The magician, the illusionist, is making magic happen. It seems like magic, but it's really just very positive, strong, consistent management skills. So a management magician feels good about what they're doing themselves. They're getting the outcomes that are positive, that are measurable, and that are surpassing their goals and usually leading in their industry or their organization. And the people who work with them, right, their team members, subordinates, and supervisors also feel good. So if your, quote, numbers were good as a manager, but your team members do everything they can to leave your department as quickly as possible, and you have really horrible turnover because they despise you, then you're not a management magician. The keys are the measurable outcomes and these other outcomes, which is what I call the, sort of the emotional, psychological, the feelings, the ROI. Because how your team members feel about you directly impacts your retention, your high-level engagement, your ability to get things done in a happy, positive way. And how you feel about yourself and about your work is incredibly important, right? We don't want you to sacrifice your own emotional contentment at the altar of some measurable goal outcome, and then you're miserable and you go home to your real life and you spread the misery and pain that you couldn't share at work. That's not right. Okay? So the Management Magicians, we are thrilled to work with them. We certainly, in my professional experience, teaching in business schools, universities, and going to organizations of all sizes around the world, in Africa, in Asia, in Australia, in Europe, in the North America, there's just an amazing amount of magicians that are out there every day using their skills to make that management magic happen. And I've been delighted and pleased and happy to work with them, but I've learned a lot too. And that's what I'm sharing in our Management Magician series. I'm honoring them, and I'm also sharing a lot of what I've seen that works. So here we are, and our specific topic today is one that goes back many years in my corporate education and professional training program and professional development. And our specific episode title is, If My Title Says Manager, Why Do I Feel Like a Babysitter? If my title says manager, why do I feel like a babysitter? And when I said this goes back in time, I mean this is something that I've been using in business programs and on-site educational corporate development programs since the 1990s, the late 1990s. So let's get to the root of this and sort of re-examine something that it continues to be brought up. People still talk to me about this and want to have this as a starting point of discussion for their on-site programs or keynotes that I'm providing, or even ask me to help develop curriculum for them to have for their specific organization. So here we are. The first part of this is interesting. My title says manager. And so the idea, of course, is that we should have in real life, and of course we're pragmatists. That means we try to make decisions based on the world as it is, not just what we wish it would be. Ideally, we should have alignment between our title and our actual real life function. So if I'm under a job title of some sort of manager or supervisor, right, then ideally I should in real life be supervising and managing. It shouldn't be that my title says one thing and in real life I'm doing something else. It's contradictory, it's illogical, it leads to inefficiencies and poor outcomes. So we need to align those two things, my title and what I really do in real life. We don't want to have a situation where somebody's a manager in name only, right? That, oh, my title's manager, but I'm not really managing anything. Some instances you have that happen where you're a manager in name only, and the reason why you're not a manager in actual practice is because you're not managing anything. The manager goes and hides in their own office, and they never talk to anybody or get out there and actually manage what's happening. They just rely on the subordinates or some assistant or somebody else to do it. And then every once in a while they'll go and take public credit for things that they're not themselves actually doing. That's not managing. You know, it's sort of hiding and then waiting for somebody else to do your job and then taking credit for it, and it's not aligned correctly. So the opposite problem we have here is where the manager is active. The manager is not just hiding in their office somewhere or taking 5-hour lunches every day, but the manager is on site. They are out and about. If they're working with distributed teams and they're logged in, they're looking at the different work products or managing things online in real time. No matter what it is, they are actually doing what they're supposed to in terms of being engaged, observing, interacting, assessing what's happening. They're doing that, which is great. The challenge is, though, that person says, my title says manager, but I don't feel like I'm actually managing. I don't feel like I'm doing these really exciting, awesome business things where I'm dealing with resource allocation, where I'm figuring out how to improve efficiencies and make it better, faster, get it right the first time, how to beat my peers, how can I achieve better results than they do. A lot of that's really exciting, and for people who love business and sort of building things, it's the fun part. I mean, the fun part is all of that, right? Is being proactive, and again, feeling like, hey, we've got a goal, we're meeting, we're surpassing the goal. We did way more than anybody else in our industry. We did way more than any other department. It was fun. It was exciting. Nobody had ever done this way. We went back and looked at some of the processes and some of the procedures that we were utilizing. We re-engineered them, or we came up with totally new things. We just tried. We were creative. We were risk takers, and look what was done. Look what was achieved. Look at the amount of services or goods that were provided that were, outstanding. Those are all really good feelings. And again, for people who have the inclination and the interest in this area, that's the fun, good stuff. You want to manage. That's why you're doing it, because you think it's enjoyable. It's not enjoyable in many instances, and which is the reason why we have the topic, when someone who wants to manage, right, they want to be big picture, they want to be proactive. They feel like they're not being proactive, which is planning ahead, right? Like, this is how we're going to do it. It's going to be awesome. I can't believe it. Look at the great things. But instead, they're just reactive. So something's happening, and they're just running around reacting to it. So they're not building anything. They're just standing there trying to stop whatever exists from falling apart, which is a totally different perspective. The other thing is the person who says, my title says manager, but why do I feel like a babysitter? Typically, historically, when I've provided these types of programs on site for managers, because that's who comes to these programs. It's usually not the subordinate team members who are in that meeting. It's the managers and their supervisors, leaders. The reason you feel like a babysitter is because you are a babysitter. Now, some of the other programs that we have, I do go back to these same fundamental principles, or I repeat, and try to tie together in different areas, because I'm trying, as much as we can, to make sense out of massive amounts of information, right? There's so much information in any of these fields. Business, organizational development, law. There's just massive amounts of detailed information. There's no way we can cover all of it, even in probably our lifetime. So what we're trying to do is build systems and framework to help us come up with big picture methods to deploy that we can then put in specific details and try to come up with better decisions and better outcomes. That's what we're trying to do. So the framework I'm arguing is this. Perception's reality. If you feel you're a babysitter, then you probably are perceived as a babysitter. My argument would be the only reason you're telling me that you believe and that you're a babysitter is because you are probably. And even if you're actually not a babysitter, the fact that you feel like that is not a good sign. Because remember, the manager is supposed to have the resource allocation, sort of bigger picture. Now, not the same big picture that the visionary leader of the organization has, but within their scope, the manager is supposed to be figuring out, okay, I only have this much time, I only have this much labor, I only have this much money, I have infrastructure issues, electricity, air conditioning, internet access, whatever. How do I juggle all that? How do I plan ahead to maximize the best outcome for my people, right? People are my team members, employees, contractors, customers. I'll even say competitors. Okay? And realize that there's going to be things beyond my control, right? A hurricane or a blackout or something that's going to negatively impact my business because it's going to impact my resources. But it's that part of the planning is interesting. Even if you're a manager and you're in a job and you have 3 people you manage and you're trying to figure out your schedules because you got to cover certain hours and some people are going to be part-time, and that's still big picture and it's forward thinking, right? The challenge is if you feel like you're babysitting, you're first of all saying that you feel like you're team members who are adults, and I'm not at all referencing a situation where people literally have minors. Like you're a manager, but you have 6-year-olds that, quote, work for you. That's illegal in most parts of the world. So we're not even touching that. You should be managing legally eligible people. And in most parts of the world, there's going to be some age requirement. Now, it's not the same, but the idea is that someone has to be old enough to be eligible legally to work. Now, I'm not talking about what happens illegally for people who have, things they're doing that are not part of the formal economy, where people who, are, human trafficked. And I'm not talking about any of these illegal sort of black market economies. I'm talking about things that are legal that we're supposed to be doing. I can't even begin to address the other issues where you literally are maybe dealing with little children, which explains why you said you're a babysitter, but everything you're doing then is most likely a crime. All right, so dealing with adults. The people that you're supposed to be working with are supposed to be legally able to work. In most parts of the world, that means there's some level of maturity that your society and system has decided is an adult or close enough to it to be eligible to work, or let's just say full-time. Okay? So many parts of the world, there's an alignment between ability to work full-time and them being legally recognized as an adult. So they can work, but they can also, live and sign a lease contract. They can get a license to drive. I mean, they're usually these things are all sort of bundled together. Okay. All that's to say, then you shouldn't be a babysitter, because babysitters are people who are not minors, who are adults that take care of little children, sometimes literally babies. Now, obviously, a baby, if it's an infant, then it's not able to do much for itself, right? And a little young infant they're not able to crawl or do anything. They can't feed themselves. They can't go to the bathroom by themselves. They're really not able to do much. So if you are babysitting an infant, then yeah, you're going to spend all your time on the minutia, because they can't do it themselves. They can't get up and go to the bathroom by themselves. They can't walk. They're not large enough to use the toilet facilities. So yeah, you change their diapers. You spend a lot of time on these things. That's part of dealing with someone that's at that stage of life. You are a manager and you're, again, working in a legal economy with adults. The term babysitter, of course, is offensive because you're not dealing with children. And we've already tabled this permanently. You're not supposed to be. I'm not talking about people doing things illegally. So it's offensive and insulting to say you're babysitting, because they're not children. They're not infants. They're not toddlers, where they need help, because they're sort of, they can walk a little bit, but sometimes it's hard because they're small and, they're 3 years old. They're not even, 9 and 10-year-olds that are totally able, in most instances, to, brush their teeth and clean themselves. You're dealing with an adult. So, of course, the idea when someone says, I'm a manager, but that's my title, but I'm like a babysitter, what it tells me is immediately the first thing I think in these types of situations is you have very, very poor management skills. Now, in real life, when I've gone to these places in the past to work with people on site who have this perception, what they want to talk to me about is what they perceive to be their very poor team members. They'll want to blame it on their team members and say, yeah, the reason I feel like I'm a babysitter is because this one's lazy and this one doesn't know how to do their job and this one is late all the time and I think that one's drunk. And, they want to blame the team members and tell me that's why everything's out of alignment. They have a title of manager, but instead of managing and doing all these interesting things about planning resources and schedules and materials and outcomes, they're running around all the time reactive, dealing with people with, childish type problems. My argument is that your problem isn't your team. Your problem is that you're not a manager. It should never devolve to the point whenever a manager, supervisor, or leader starts telling me about how poor their team members are, it's a red flag to me that you're a poor leader or manager. It doesn't tell me anything about your team members. And it's this analogy. In many different programs, I talk about outside work and inside work. Because inside work, people sometimes want to pretend like there's all these magic rules that sort of pop up when you go to work that don't apply in society at large. And it's usually inconsistent. I'm saying this. Let's say you met a person who was a parent. So they're a parent. They've recently adopted a 3-month-old baby. All right. So they start talking to you. And they're like telling you, and they're like, oh, that baby, oh, it's the worst baby ever. That baby, all it does, it just takes away my sleep. And it's just, I've read about other babies, and they're much better. And this one is just horrible, and I don't understand. It's just making my life a nightmare. Or let's say it's someone who's a parent and they say to you, I have 4 kids and they're all disasters. The older ones are lazy. My house is filthy. They never, clean up or do anything they're supposed to. And I read and I see television and movies, and other people's children aren't like these children. These children are just horrible. Like I said, they're lazy. They talk back to me. They're disrespectful. They have horrible attitudes. I also think they're stupid, and because of these horrible children, my house is dirty and I'm, always stressed out. And I'm screaming all the time, and I have high blood pressure, and these children are the worst ever, and I just don't understand why I have the worst, laziest, stupidest, dirtiest 4 children in the universe. Okay. Whenever somebody starts talking about their children, whether it's a little infant they just adopted or their 4 kids that are, between the ages of 6 and 16, immediately I don't think, wow, those sound like the worst children in the universe. Immediately I think you sound like the worst parent in the universe, and here's why. We all know that we have distinctive individual traits. So if we know somebody individually, let's say it's, we're talking about, hey, there's Javier, okay? If we know Javier, it's somebody that we know, we might describe Javier and say, oh, you know how when Javier tells a joke, that one side of his mouth sort of looks kind of crazy and he kind of makes that half smile, and I'd say, yeah, Javier always does that. It's a distinctive thing about Javier. With the analogy of the parents telling me how horrible and lazy and stupid their children are, and then that's why their house is dirty and they can't get anything done and it's such a nightmare and they can't sleep and they have all this horrible high blood pressure, my argument is that they are the responsible party for creating the culture, explaining what was required, and holding the children accountable in a healthy, safe way to teach the children the skills they need to be successful. Children don't come into the world just magically, automatically knowing how to clean their room, how to do their chores, how to use the restroom. They don't. That's why literally these things are called like potty training. Why? Because there's some people that just sort of get it. It's few and far between, but they usually have seen somebody else do it who's an adult modeled it. You train. You have to teach people. If you have to teach them how to use their potty, that's what we call it potty training, right, to use the restroom, then it makes sense that you have to teach them all this other information. How do you make your bed? How do you do your chores? How do you plan your schedule so you get your homework done and you're ready for school? How do you lay out your clothes the night before or early the right day? How do you set up your hygiene routine so you're making sure that you're clean and ready to go for school, and your teeth and are brushed and your hair is groomed and you're showered and your clothes are ready for school? How do you learn how to share with the chores in the yard? How do you learn to do laundry and fold laundry? How do you learn all this stuff? If you have to train humans, all of us, me, you, all of us went through this to learn how do I use the potty restroom facilities no matter what part of the world I'm in, right? How do I use utensils? You have to teach us this, because I don't know. I didn't just come into the world knowing this. Culturally, there are going to be different nuances, but somebody had to train me. Then this sort of just illogical and disrespectful argument that your kids are going to just figure this stuff out without appropriate management and training and leadership and feedback and evaluation, it's silly. Of course they don't know how to do it because they're growing up for the first time. Just like they didn't know how to use the restroom facilities, right? And they didn't know how to learn to walk. I mean, you're training them to do all of that, so you have to train them to do these other things. So if somebody says to me, oh, my kids are so lazy and horrible and the house is filthy, what I think is you never trained them. You didn't set up a structure where you showed them, you positively motivated, encouraged them, you supported them, you evaluated them, and you rewarded the good behavior. So now they don't know how to do it. And if you did tell them or show them one time, you never set up a system. So maybe you showed them one time, and then you're not modeling the behavior. Your room's not clean, your bed's not made, so they're not going to go do it because they don't see that it's required. You have to teach them, and it has to be consistent. It's not like you did it one time. Well, that's how you use the restroom, and then you're screaming and yelling because why doesn't my toddler know how to use the restroom? You showed them once. This is an ongoing, consistent, daily process. And for raising a child from infancy to adulthood is decades, almost in most parts of the world, decades of work. 15, 16, 17, 18 years of work consistently. Because there's always new stuff. So, we taught them, okay, now great, we're using the restroom, but now look at all this other stuff we have to learn. And this argument when someone says, parents are telling me how horrible their kids are, I never think their kids are horrible. Now, it may turn out, of course, every once in a while that there really is a situation where they did everything that they could possibly do, and that kid is that weird, not weird, but the statistically weird, meaning a rare anomaly, that the child maybe really does have some issues of why they're not doing it. And there are very rare conditions where someone might be unable to process the information. Sometimes people have developmental nuances and challenges, and so that explains why they weren't doing it, because they had something that was treatable that you need to be educated on to learn how to communicate with them effectively. But I don't buy when I listen to, and I try never to listen to this in my life. People tell me how horrible their kids are because your kid's not horrible. In most instances, assuming there isn't some sort of medical or other special condition, you're a horrible manager. You didn't train them. You didn't model the behavior. You didn't reinforce it. You didn't evaluate it. You didn't consistently do what you needed to do. And that's the exact same thing at work. That is the exact same thing at work. Now, the difference, of course, is at work, the person's already gone through a lot of development before they come there. That's why we earlier said we're not including illegal sort of black market economies of child labor and things of this nature, human trafficking, whatever. Those are illegal, my personal opinion, immoral and unethical. But with adults, they already have learned how to use the restroom and groom themselves. Right? Okay, that's great. It took a lot of work off your plate. Now we're at work. Now, does that necessarily mean that just because they may have content knowledge, maybe they have graduated from a program where they've learned how to type at a very high typing speed, that doesn't automatically mean they understand everything about your industry, about your department, about your expectations, about your institutional knowledge, about your culture. You have to teach that to them. You have to teach it. First of all, you have to make them feel that they're in a safe environment to learn. We know that when we have people who are horrible, and I do mean the word horrible in terms of outcomes in their practices, where they say their children are, lazy and stupid and all this, we know that the parents, in many instances, have created an environment of fear. There's no way I'm going to get out there and try really hard to learn something new if every single time I'm trying, I'm screamed at, I am humiliated, I'm degraded, I'm made to feel bad. Then I'm not going to try to learn, and I'm going to become very angry, and I'm just going to give up. Sometimes people become incredibly defeatist in life because of a horrible situation like this, where somebody who never, ever should have been in a management position in a family. Unfortunately, it happens a bit. And I've shared some of the work I've done as a lawyer and some of even the volunteer work I've done and do trying to help families and kids in need and things of this nature. You want it to be an environment. If you're a manager and that's your title and you're aligned in real life, then you're the leader, right? So this analogy to the parent or caregiver or guardian with the children. It's a safe, healthy environment where, of course, the first time I try to use the potty, I don't get it perfect. Or maybe I got it perfect the first time, and then it was a little bit of a second time, third time, and 50th time, it was a bit of a struggle because it's a process. So I need to be in an environment where I feel safe, I feel physically safe, and I feel emotionally safe. It's the same thing at work. If your title is manager, then it's your responsibility as that leader, as that manager, to make a safe environment where people feel they can learn. Learning means I'm going to try it and I didn't get it the first time, or maybe I got it but then I wasn't really sure why I got it, and then the second to third time I needed help. I'm learning. I will only do that if I trust that I'm safe. Again, physically safe, because that, believe it or not, well, what am I saying? We do a lot of programs, and I don't even know how many hours in real life at work where people physically don't feel safe, just like at home. As a manager, it's a safe environment. So they trust the environment is safe. There are not going to be negative consequences for them learning. And ideally, they need to trust you as a manager. You have got to model the behavior. When you go around, it's that parent, right, the analogy. You go, we've all seen this in our personal lives at some point in your life. You go to somebody's personal house, apartment, wherever they live, and you walk in, and the parents just going on, the adults, oh, these kids are so dirty and lazy, and you look in the adults' room, and it's as dirty as the rest of it. Well, that's why they're dirty. That's part of it. You must model the behavior to make it, to show the benefit of it and to give an incentive. You can never support this idea, do as I say, not as I do. Because it's not logical. There's no alignment. Just like we said, the title manager is what you say. It also has to be aligned with what you do for it to work consistently and have great outcomes. It's the same thing in a home. If I'm the adult, I have to do it and say it. If I just say it and then I'm doing something else, then what it teaches the people watching me is to do what I do. And that's what they're going to do. And then they'll also probably do the same thing the adult does, which is kind of lie and say they're not doing that, even though everyone can see that they are. And you see this with kids. It's so quick how much they can pick this up. They're just going to model the behavior. At work, yes, you're an adult and they're an adult. But you have either the expertise, the advanced amount of experience, or education, or you had great connections, but for some reason you're put in the role of managing the resources. Then that means you have to manage them. Safe environment. People are able to try. They're supported. They're encouraged. They're motivated. They're made to feel valuable. That's what all this motivation, all this, all of the structure that you build into these systems where people feel good about themselves. And when they make a mistake, oh, wow, I made a mistake, they immediately own up to it. They apologize if necessary. They fix it if they can. If not, they learn not to repeat it, and they feel good about themselves. They feel like, oh, this is all part of my learning. That only happens in a safe environment where they trust other people, so you don't have bullying. You don't have people, peers, trying to sabotage each other. You don't play favorites. Managers have to be consistent. That's like the parent. You have 4 kids. Every one of those kids needs to feel, quote, equally loved. If those kids feel one person's a favorite or one person is the least favorite, the proverbial black sheep of the family, then it ruins the whole dynamic because they don't trust each other. They don't trust the adults, and everyone becomes in a very unstable situation where they're jockeying for individual position instead of working collectively in a healthy environment. No one trusts anything. You should never feel shame or embarrassment when you fail, because everyone fails. As a good manager / parent, you teach people that. And you work them through the after analysis. Okay, what did we learn from this? What do you think caused it? Talk to me about how you feel. You never want a child to feel that they are not valuable, that they're not a good person. Of course, they're great people. We all make mistakes. Let's talk about how this happened. Were we late? Were we rushing? Did we not read the instructions? Were we trying to impress somebody else at school, and that's why we engage in that behavior? There's an answer. Let's work through it, and let's keep it moving toward those healthy, good long-term outcomes and surpassing them. At work, it's identical. If you tell me that you feel like a babysitter, it tells me a whole bunch of things. A, it tells me that you don't respect your team members. It tells me that you are a very poor manager and you have not created a safe environment. You're not modeling the behavior that you want. You are not encouraging, supporting, and nurturing in a consistent and non-biased manner all of the team members, that people are engaging in childlike behavior because you treat them like children. You're not treating them like children in a healthy, positive environment, because very successful parents, and I hate to use that word, but that's in terms of outcomes, that's what happens. Their children are still children. But they've learned they're learning self-discipline, they're learning self-reliance, they're learning self-actualization, they're learning to trust themselves, they're learning to grow, they're learning that they're consistently feeling safe and that they're valuable, that their opinions matter, they're learning confidence. All of these things, they're still they still might be 9 years old, but they're very different from somebody who comes from an environment where they get none of the structure that they need. And that's what happens in businesses. You shouldn't feel like a babysitter. You should feel like a teacher, a scholar. Some people like the idea of a coach. I don't care what words you like, but you should feel like the person who either has more expertise and knowledge or just volunteered and was selected to lead. Then lead. How do you lead? You tell them what they need to do. You show them what they need to do. You are doing it, so they're constantly getting a subtle reinforcement. They're in a safe place where they trust themselves, they trust you, and they trust their peers. And then you're going to give them constant feedback. So if you think you're going to talk to your team members once every year and fill out a form that you said you were required to do for evaluation, and you can't figure out why you feel like you're babysitting, it's because they don't know what you want, and you never talk to them. You don't tell me what I'm supposed to do, and you just tell me one time, go make your bed and clean your room up. You tell me that in January, and you think you're going to come to me in December, and I've just magically been doing it all this time, whether I'm 9 or 19 or 90 with no feedback. It's not logical. Now, the idea is, as we gave the example of the great, super successful in terms of outcome parent, you go, and people sometimes are surprised who come from different environments. They say, these kids can't be that self-disciplined, that happy, that well-behaved. Yeah, they can. And once you get somebody in there in an environment where they've had years of success, right? So they've had failures, and that failure didn't mean they were a failure. It just meant it was a learning opportunity. They've never felt threatened for their safety or for their emotional health. They feel secure. They feel loved. They feel supported. Yeah, they do, with this years of consistency, learn these skills and then begin to create and go to even more elaborate heights on their own. That's where you get, I see these, I love documentaries and shows about young people, really young people who are like inventors and doing all these really amazing things in art or science. And in almost every one of those cases, when they interview and talk to the family, you'll see a lot of excellent management from the parents or guardians, because again, you can feel how safe everyone feels, right? And that the children were brought up in an environment where for years the behavior was role modeled, and they were given lots of feedback. They were supported through their poor decision making and bad outcomes, and then just bad things that happen in life. And because of that, at some point, then they were able to, because they had such a great foundation, they then were able to go out and do all these really creative, amazing things in art or sports or science. And it's because they had so much stability, and they had this environment where they could flourish. It's the same thing at work. You never will feel like a babysitter. You should feel like part of this amazing process where people develop into beyond even what you thought or they thought they were capable of. And once you have the environment where it flourishes, and over time, that's why retention is so important. Over time, people want to be in this environment. They want to be part of your management magician experience. They look forward to going to work. You look forward to going to work. When something bad happens, they know they can trust you. They can trust each other. And over time, years of building this, or depending on your field, then yeah, you have a really great group that there's very little, quote, parenting that goes on. That's why that family, think back to that analogy with that really successful parenting skill. You see those kids, and they've had that safe, healthy, consistent, role-modeled environment, and yeah, maybe they're 8, 9, 10 years old, and their beds are made, or whatever the expectations are. They're polite and respectful. They're enthusiastic about their schoolwork or their hobbies. They seem healthy. They're engaged. Yes, because they've had a whole period of development in this safe environment. Now, that's a very different behavior, and that parent is never having to come, and you're not yelling at the kid about why didn't you make your bed. They're not, engaging in, obviously yelling is an act of verbal violence in most instances, because they put all these safe, fundamental skills in place for the child. At some point, that's why they seem so much more advanced than other kids, because they already know how to do all that other stuff, and they're pleased to be part of success. It makes them feel good to whatever the family unit's decided, right? So if it's keeping your room clean, and then they want to be part of something that makes them all together sharing success. It's the same thing at work. Once you build these systems and set it up, you're never running around, quote, babysitting, because your team is doing these great things. You're going to spend most of your time doing development and talking about their future, working together for creative solutions. It's a very low-stress environment without this sort of conflict and people jockeying for favoritism. So those work environments, those managers feel like they're not really doing anything stressful in terms of, quote, babysitting, because the people have been in everyone, the managers, the team members, everybody's been in a safe environment for a long time where they know what to do. They're reinforced with that positive choice. They have role models where you're doing it as a manager. And so it seems from the outside like it's magic, right? That's like you go to that family where they have those successful parenting skills and the kids seem like that's magic because they're so, quote, well-behaved. It's not that. It's because they've learned to do that in a healthy way. Now, you can have an environment where the rooms are clean, but the children were able to get to that behavior through fear. So you can feel it, right? They're nervous or eye contact or scared. Yeah, they made their bed because they're scared they're going to be physically assaulted or abused or neglected or not be able to eat or whatever. That's not the right way to do it in terms of long-term outcomes. All you've done is petrify somebody into doing something short-term. And underneath it, of course, they have all these horrible feelings about you, the person who did the negative outcomes, and they also have really horrible feelings about themselves. This is not working. This is a very, very poor in many ways catastrophic abusive situation. It's a healthy environment where everybody's pitching in together, right? Like, oh, I did this, my siblings, we were all doing this, and my foster brothers and sisters, we were doing this, and our parents were doing it, and now we all get to share in this great thing. It's a team. It's the same thing at work. So when you build these and you set them up, then after a while over time, because you have great retention at work, it looks like magic because everyone's sort of doing what they're supposed to, and the managers never ever say anything about babysitting because their team members are trying so hard to do excellent things and new things and better things. So all this is to say this. If you feel like a babysitter is a really serious sign that obviously we've got to get a management upgrade of your skills. You've got to get to a point where from the very beginning, day one, your foundation, you feel good about yourself so you can role model this great behavior for other people. If you feel horrible about yourself, if your life is a disaster, if you are stressed out or unhappy or scared or insecure or frightened, you're not going to be able to show anybody else how to be healthy and safe and make good choices and learn through failure, understanding what happened with the failure and moving forward in a healthy way. It's just impossible. So you're going to have to get yourself to a very different emotional, psychological place, and then you're going to have to build a culture of safety, support, again, over and over and over again. Positive feedback, very helpful feedback when there are things that need to be improved, that people know that they're valuable, they're cared about, and they're invested in for a long term. So it'll never happen to a management magician. Their title is a manager, and they're going to feel like a manager, but they're also going to feel like a mentor. They're going to feel like a leader. They're going to feel cared about, respected. They make huge positive impacts on people's lives, and that's what our management magicians do. But there's a whole system behind that. I am so appreciative that you joined me. I am just grateful, and as always, if you have anything that you want to share, come to CourtneyAnderson.com and let me know what's on your mind. And again, thank you for taking the time out of your life to be part of the program. Thanks.